Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hello again. I am back from my travels, and if you've been following me here, you know that I was away for a month in South America. I was in Peru and Ecuador, to be exact. I was in the Galapagos and also hiking Machu Picchu. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to last week's episode where I recorded the intro while in the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. Now, the bird life there was unreal, and you'll hear that in the background of that intro. Seriously, check it out if you haven't already heard it. That was my episode with Vicky Punter. I really had an amazing time away, and I kind of wish that I was still traveling. But I will admit that it's great to be home, and it's great to get back into my rhythm again. When I was traveling, unfortunately, I didn't run once while I was away. That was driving me crazy. I did work out a couple of times at the hotel gym in Quito, but that was about it in terms of just really formal exercise. So I'm back to running, and John and I, we just joined our local gym. So I can get back to some strength training and also some swimming, which I've just done on occasion in the past. And I'm thinking there might be a triathlon in my future. So join the gym. It's just down the road, and I'm going to start getting some swimming in. Anyway, it's great to be back to my regular exercise and my quote-unquote normal food. So just back in that rhythm again. In a couple of weeks, I am taking off just a super short trip. I'm heading to Austin for a trade show that centers around running. It's called the Running Event, and I'm super excited about that. I'm excited to check out the new running gear, but I'm also going to be recording a few podcasts while I'm there, and I'm very excited about those that I have lined up, and you're going to hear those probably by the end of the year. So today, I don't have a guest. I've got another Ask Me Anything episode, and this is where I take some time to answer your questions that have come up. And just a side note that if you'd like to email me with a question for future episodes, you can do so by emailing beth@beboldpodcast.com. Another fun way to do it is by calling 877-280-5170, and you can leave a message there. And then I may actually include that, your voice and your question, in a future episode. So two fun ways, email or voice message. So for this first question, this came in, I think it actually came in via Facebook. And a couple of people had asked me this question, including Eileen. She was one of them. She and others wanted to know why I wake up at 5:18 each morning. And I'm guessing they heard me talk about this on a previous episode. And it's a great question because it's a little quirky, a little strange, and it does have a backstory. First, let me tell you about this job that I had more than 10 years ago. So it starts with that. My office was located about 20 to 25 minutes drive south of Seattle, and the start time for everyone in the building was 7 a.m. That meant that I had to get up at about 5:15 every morning to get ready and then make the drive down there. And it was a job that I know I've talked about on the podcast before. It was one that I did not like at all. I won't go into the details about how awful the environment was. I will say that the pay was great, which is why I stuck around, but it was not a great environment. I will say this, though. The good thing that came out of it was that is when I knew I never wanted to work for someone else again, and it's what made me start my own business. So it was so I didn't have to work in that type of an environment again. Anyway, when you have to set an alarm to get up and do something you don't want to do, as you know, it's always difficult getting out of bed. And that was definitely the case for that job, which, I think I probably had that longer than any other job. And it was, I think it was just over 2 years. Now, when I left that job and I started my own business, I found that I was then so excited by what I was doing that getting up early in the morning was easy because I just couldn't wait to get the day started. So I was pretty much naturally getting up around that time, around 5:15, and I would set my alarm just in case. Now that 5:15 alarm morphed into 5:18 because that's John's birthday. He was born on 5:18. So that's the reason why the quirky time of 5:18, and that's why my alarm is always set to that on a regular day. Now, in terms of why I do get up so early, now this wasn't always the case. I wasn't always an early bird, but I have found that I have come to really love the mornings. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently who is also an early bird, although I don't know, I think he gets up at like somewhere in the 4 o'clock hour. And we both concurred that not having that time in the morning makes it feel like the day is wasted. Now, on the rare occasion when I sleep in, and that's like quotes, sleep in until 6:30 or 7, I really feel like I've wasted part of the day. I really enjoy that early morning time that gives me a chance to meditate, to journal, and then just to sip on a hot cup of something to drink, decaf coffee or tea, something along those lines. And now that the days are shorter and it's so dark in the morning, I sit by the fireplace and I wait for it to get light out before I go for a run. So that's the reason behind the early wake up for me, and specifically why I set an alarm for 5:18. Next question. Tiffany asked if I've ever been scared when I'm traveling. You know, there was one big time that's an unequivocal yes, but then there are a lot of times when it's just a low-level yes, if that makes sense. So first, the big one, and I'll tell you about that. In 1992, I was a young backpacker traveling through Cambodia with a friend of mine. Her name's Helen. And I was at the start of a year-long trip through Southeast Asia and Australia, and we were both just pretty fresh out of college. So we didn't have a lot of money. We were both on a tight budget. And at the time, Cambodia was in disarray. The Khmer Rouge was still kind of around, although they had been somewhat dismantled. There were elections coming up, but I think they were probably a year out or so. But in the meantime, before those elections, there were 4 factions that were fighting for power. And at that point, no one knew who was really in control of the government or the country. Anyway, we traveled overland by bus from Saigon to Phnom Penh. But we were really in the country to see Angkor Wat in Siem Reap. Siem Reap is, it's under 200 miles from Phnom Penh. That's not a lot of mileage. So you'd think it would be relatively easy to get there. But for a couple of backpackers, it was expensive to fly. And we heard that they were charging an entry fee at the airport for anyone who wanted to visit Angkor Wat. So we didn't want to pay that entry fee of, the rumor was $120. And that's just a ridiculous amount of money, even by today's standards. And that was way back in 1992. So we knew that that money would just go to line the pockets of the politicians. So we didn't want to pay it. And we didn't have it. I mean, we had it, but we didn't want to spend it, as poor backpackers. So we thought we would try to go overland. Now, that 200 miles or so between the cities today would only take you about 5 to 6 hours at the most by vehicle. But back then, the roads were so bad that it literally took 2 days to traverse that mileage. The other option would be to go by train. But landmines were being placed on the railroad tracks by the Khmer Rouge, and at least people thought it was the Khmer Rouge doing that. So that wasn't safe either. Actually, the first car of the train that left each morning, it was just a big flatbed, and it was free of charge because they knew if anyone was going to get killed by a landmine on the tracks, it would be that first car. So they just let people go for free on that. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, Helen and I decided to hitch a ride. So we negotiated a vehicle out of Phnom Penh one morning, and we were warned not to take the first vehicle because of the possibility of landmines that might have been placed on the road overnight. And we had also been told that if we had to stop along the way to pee, that we should go on the road and not to wander off on the sides for the same reason, because there might be landmines. Now, we negotiated a taxi on that first day to get us as far as a town called Battambang, Bong, and that was probably a little over halfway, and we overnighted there. And it's worth noting that it was 120 degrees and there was no electricity in the town. So we stayed in someone's home who was looking to make a little money. We were very hot, of course. There was no reprieve at all. So we overnighted, and then we left in the morning to negotiate the rest of the way to Siem Reap. Now, it turns out we weren't able to get a ride in the same vehicle because the vehicles going that way were filled already with locals and with produce. So Helen and I ended up splitting up. She went in one vehicle and I went in another, and she went ahead of me. And I was in the back of this pickup truck that was open in the back, and it just had a couple of benches on either side. Now, this is where the story gets a little tricky and a little scary. The roads were pretty bad, and all the vehicles had to go very slowly. And when we got to a dried creek bed or an area where the road was so bad that the vehicle had to come to a near stop, there would be either poor Cambodians on the street begging for money, and sometimes the driver would just throw the local currency out the window to pay them something, or there would be military men extracting money from the drivers to allow them to pass. Now, at one of these stops, one of the military men there saw me in the back of this truck, and he walked back to talk to me, but he only spoke Khmer. So he's talking to me in Khmer, and I'm just saying, no understand, no understand, and he's laughing at me. Now, along with him were a few other military guys, and all of them were carrying rocket launchers, rifles, and AK-47s. So yeah, now I know the difference between those weapons. And yeah, I was pretty scared, Tiffany. That was really the scariest time for me in my travels. The driver came around and he tried to hand one of the military guys some reals, the local currency, but the military guy just brushed him off. The driver then got back in the truck and he started to drive away. And it was then that this military guy pulled out a hand grenade. And that's when I learned what it feels like to have your legs fall out from underneath you. Even though I was sitting down in the back of this pickup truck, I was so frightened that I just went numb from the waist down. Now, he didn't pull the pin on the hand grenade, thankfully, and the driver just took off. And I actually don't know if that driver even knew what was going on back there. Anyway, I found out from one of the other local passengers that was in the back of this pickup truck with me that the guy had wanted U.S. dollars. And so that's why he didn't take the money from the driver. He was looking for U.S. dollars. I met up with Helen that night, and we visited Angkor Wat over the coming days. And then, crazily enough, I know, we actually took the road back to Phnom Penh and hitched our way over the 2 days to return to get back there. So that's my big story of being really scared when I've been traveling. Now, that's the big story. Of course, there have been other times when I've just been nervous, but I do things anyway. And as many listeners know, I rode a motorcycle from Seattle to Panama, and I rode solo. And of course, I was nervous throughout that trip, but I took precautions. I didn't stop on the side of the road, even when I really wanted to take a picture. And I was careful, especially once I left the U.S., to stay in places, the hotels and hostels, where I felt safe. I never camped because I just thought that would be way too risky. And I always made sure I had a safe place where I could lock up my bike. So I was never scared on that trip at the level I was in Cambodia. And I've been nervous in other places, like in Papua New Guinea. But I've been nervous in places like Watertown, New York, where I had guys slowing down in their trucks as I ran, on a Sunday morning. And just they were driving just right by me, slowing down. So it's not just strange and exotic destinations or far-flung places that can be a little nerve-wracking. Kind of be in your own backyard, too. in the end, I have to ask myself, how much do I want to be at that destination or do that activity? And then I can overcome my fear about it. And I don't think there's anything travel-wise I wouldn't do because I was afraid of it. But I would say that jumping out of a plane, now that's a whole nother category. I am not doing that. I think anything where you could actually die, like that, I don't want to do. Okay, I have one more question I'll answer, and this one is kind of a quick answer. Emily asked what I do on long layovers. She had written that question when she had delayed flights and a long layover at London Gatwick. Well, first, I will admit that an unplanned long layover does kind of suck. Mostly because when that happens, you never know when something might change with your flight and you end up departing earlier than you had anticipated. So you don't want to venture off too far from the gate. But sometimes I actually like a long layover if it's on purpose. Now, I remember I used to take flights back from Asia that gave me a 12-hour layover at the Seoul, South Korea airport. And I loved that. I had lounge privileges and I would spend the day getting caught up on email and eating for free in a nice, quiet space. And in that lounge, they also have massage chairs and there's showers. So really, I felt like it was a nice, relaxing time before I re-entered real life back at home. Nowadays, if you have a long planned layover at an airport, oftentimes you can take a day tour of the city you're in. Someone will actually take you out for the day on a bus and you can spend that time touring around. Now, I haven't had the opportunity to do this myself, but next time I do have a long layover somewhere and this is offered, I'm definitely going to give it a try. In the show notes, I'm going to link to an article or two that features a list of airports that have these great day tours. And if you have a layover that's long, but not long enough to leave the airport, there are a couple of things that I'd suggest. First, buy lounge privileges if you don't already have them. And that way you can spend time in a quiet space, away from all the gates and all the craziness that happens, in the regular terminals of the airport. And you can eat and you can drink, definitely non-alcoholic. Sometimes they'll charge for alcoholic drinks, but you can eat and drink for free. And it's just a nice space. And there's always Wi-Fi there as well. Now, another thing you might do is check out a website. And this is run by my friend Harriet Baskus. It's called Stuck at the Airport. She's actually a former podcast guest as well. Now, Harriet likes to uncover the most interesting and quirky things she can find at airports, and then she'll post about them. And she actually takes guest submissions. I think she's still doing that on some things as well. So check out her website, and then you might be able to contribute some stuff to her as well. And that'll just give you a sense of purpose at the airport. And I will admit, too, that some airports are just more interesting than others. I don't know what London Gatwick is like, but I will tell you that the Singapore airport is amazing. There is stuff going on there day and night, and there's free massage chairs all over the place. So if you're ever in Singapore, that's a good place to get stuck at the airport. Emily, I hope that information was helpful for you. Okay. That's it for today's Ask Me Anything episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and the podcast in general with anyone whom you think might enjoy it. I can't tell you enough. Word of mouth is so important in helping get the word out about this podcast and any podcast, really. Please subscribe. When you subscribe, you're telling your podcast provider that you like the show, and that helps it to get more visibility. I know there's a lot of competition out there. There are a lot of other podcasts that you could be listening to, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. Please just take that extra step to ensure you're receiving all of the episodes by subscribing. It's free, after all, so I won't even charge you for that. Don't forget to check out my tours at wandertours.com. If you're interested in joining me on a trip to South India or Papua New Guinea, those are the two tours for which I still have a couple of spots left and available in 2019. You can find them on the Wander Tours site, and that's WANDER, wandertours.com. If you'd like to connect with me, you can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. You can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips for making your travels safer. This month, I'm giving away a Black Rapid camera strap, and that's worth just under $70 too. So that's kind of cool. One winner will be chosen from subscribers to my newsletters. So make sure you're on board to get those details, and I'll link to those details of that giveaway in the show notes. Ladies, you can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. We've got over 2,700 members in that group. It's a community of amazing women who are sharing their wins and sometimes their struggles. We're learning from each other. We're sharing some great information and encouragement. So please join that. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.